There is an old hotel in the town I grew up in, a stately Italianate building from the mid 19th century. It still has a fantastic bar, and the restaurant, while riding a high under new ownership presently, would yo yo in my youth from being pretty good to pretty low. The place is typically busy nowadays, and even during the summer of COVID was able to keep up thanks to ample outdoor seating. And it is a fantastic building. From the time I could legally drink, I always enjoyed sitting at the bar for a beer or, more recently, an old fashioned, my drink of choice. It just made me feel tweedy. I don't want to go into the history of this former private house long ago turned hotel, though it has a good share of stories to be sure. What I want to talk about is what we all talked about when I was a child. The old hotel was haunted. And this just wasn't kids crafting these tales. These stories were printed in newspapers and even a couple books of regional paranormal lore. The story I'd always heard was that a man had been shot and died on the steps of the front porch sometime after it had been converted to a hotel, which I believe puts us in the 1880s or 1890s, horse and buggy days, as the man was shot in or while coming out of a coach. Regardless, it was this man who the stories were told about. He was the one who was haunting the building to this day. And you'd hear from friends, older siblings who worked there at the hotel, busing, or in the wait staff, talk about utensils being thrown or furniture being rearranged in the night, all the typical haunted house business and that. While I accepted these stories, maybe not totally believing all of the details, but certainly not doubting that the hotel was haunted, and I mean, if you took most any child, and certainly if you took any child who was predisposed to such stories and just have them look at the building, they would agree with me. It must be haunted. They wouldn't even need to be primed with your stories. So, in a tradition repeated in any town of any size, I continued to faithfully spread the stories and probably, almost certainly, put in my own minor embellishments as a person is obligated to do in this telephone game. I'm trying to remember my embellishments to the story, and I think one of the older Lutz girls had told me that their friend worked there and had a fork thrown at them from an unseen force in an empty room. And upon retelling, I likely told people that I had heard it from the first-hand source and that I knew this person to be trustworthy. But even the source I'd actually heard it from, well, I can't honestly vouch for the trustworthiness. And I've said it before that every town has such a place, has at least one haunted spot that is the focal point for local lore. You need this before you can even apply to have a post office, I'm pretty sure. Our town had a good number of such places, but the hotel was unquestionably the monarch. People from outside of town knew about it, and even people from far exotic locales such as Eastern Ohio and West Virginia had heard of the paranormal goings-on at the hotel. Though I may have thought the origins were vague, I never questioned the historical shooting event that spurred the stories. Besides, such violence was kind of cavalier not too long ago. Though in high school, my confidence would be greatly tested. It is an event which, reflecting upon it, may have been the birth of my being more skeptical about this and really skeptical about just everything else and anything else. For all the things I have been and always had been, I was definitely not a skeptical child, and I'm embarrassed greatly by all the nonsense I believed in or created whole cloth. About 5 years prior to my moving to town, an old movie theater had closed. Not a grand theater, but an old one dating back to 1917. Nowadays, I try to imagine being there for flickering films 15 minutes long, then for those golden silence of the 1920s, seeing Louise Brooks and W.C. Fields on the screen, and those who were actually in the film together. I think it's called the Old Army Gang or something like that. But being a feral child, a couple friends and I would periodically sneak into the building, daring as the police station was less than 50 yards away. But easy enough as a local vagrant and legend in his own right, was well known to stay in the basement of the old cinema in the winter months. And so there was a pretty easy means of access. And that's why I say sneak into the building and not break into it. We would sit in the dark theater with its torn screen. And there were still candies in a vending machine, chocolates in a machine last filled around 1985. We continued to do this until when in high school a group formed in order to buy the theater and restore it into a multi-purpose venue. And while we were feral kids, we weren't really bad kids, and so we weren't going to break into, well, sneak into something that was being utilized. For all the time we had known it, it was just a vacant building like some of the houses on the outskirts of town that we also would sit around in, although they had considerably less chocolate in them. And no, we definitely didn't eat that chocolate, but we definitely opened it up. And I remember there was like it had a white coating on it. It was very weird and has nothing to do with the story. But that organization that formed to revamp, revitalize, restore that theater, I didn't give them a lot of credit in the beginning, but to that credit, they did get very far. The old theater with its many bulbed awning marquee has been restored and has now been open for a number of years and has some decent names come through and concerts and spoken word things. They even play occasional movies. It's a fantastic place and nearly unrecognizable from the ghostly hall that I had known it as. But here's what happened. There was a writing contest in my high school. I was a junior, I believe, and it was to write about a ghost in the movie theater. And I didn't participate in it, but I was aware of it because when summer came, my friend Brandon and I walked past the theater on a summer night, and in the ticket booth was a large newspaper clipping that we read. It was about how the movie theater was haunted. Now, I had been tuned into this building for years, and I knew it better than most people. I even worked next door in an Italian restaurant for a couple of years with folks who had gone to see movies there when it was still open. I was also well aware of local lore and prided myself on being able to recite the different tales and rumors. In the kitchen or at late night congregations of youth, you were regarded by your ability to do such things. It was a role as much as being the kid who could outsprint a car for a block or consistently hit home runs over the fence while still in elementary schools. It was just, it was my role, and I suppose in a way it still is. Despite that, I never, ever heard of any such thing at the movie theater. I can't possibly stress that enough because I collected these stories the same way other people collect baseball cards or bad habits. So I immediately doubted the story and could not help but be reminded of the writing contest earlier in the year. It seemed pretty clear that this was the most likely origin of this ghost story, and I was reading in the clip, and not from a county daily paper, but from one of the big papers out of Pittsburgh. It irritated me in a way that I really can't completely express. I've been thinking about it for years now, and I guess it seemed like a cheap thing to do. It was fabricating culture to be exploited. I don't believe in ghosts. I've said this here a lot. And the stories, though, they still give me chills and make me hesitant to walk into, say, the coal room in my basement late at night. But I don't believe in ghosts. The stories, though, are important, and I love them. They are culture. They are a real culture. They are the fabrications of children and drinkers and great conversationalists, and they morph and emerge and appeal strongly to those who believe that old things and people and places have reference and are beautiful and can still tell us something. And I realize I may be being a bit too purple and poetic about it, but this is what I think. And I'm all right with the concept of legend tripping and even a business cashing in on its haunted reputation. But this was crass. Lately, I've been saying that the media is a hooded phantom that prowls behind culture with a long knife destined for the throat. This was the first time I'd really felt that. It made me wonder if this just wasn't the same way the hotel in town had gotten its reputation. Was I was I just repeating stories crafted by some teen looking for extra English credit? Or some bottom rung journalist needing to fill valuable negative space in a rag? So I became more skeptical. These days, if I want to believe something I hear is true, I just assume that it isn't. I doubt until I verify. I also assume that everyone else does copious amount of drugs. This is something else, another belief of mine, but operating under such assumption explains a lot about the world and how it and the people in it operate. What's more, my experience has demonstrated to me time and again that I'm probably more sober than the average person. The old hotel still claims to be haunted. It's changed owners again, and the story seems to have altered greatly. Now there's a young girl in a white dress who's supposedly seen by diners and staff alike. Young girl in a white dress, pretty common, like stopping on train tracks, only to be pushed off the train tracks mysteriously by ghosts of children whose school bus had been hit by a train. I don't think I need to outline the reasons why I doubt this story, but perhaps it is more accurate for me to say that I have no doubt that this story does not come from the folk tradition, but certainly from a boorish campaign to generate interest in a place. And I can't blame the owners, the business owners, because despite my harsh words, I know that most restaurants fail quickly. I think it's more than half fail within the first year or 2 years, and that the group behind the movie theater had invested lots of money and even more time into a gamble that could have gone in a far less successful direction. Haunting stories have always been popular and will always generate interest in a place. And national television shows such as Ghost Hunters would kick off a new wave of heightened interest around the time Bond and I were entering college. So I am sympathetic to these businesses, but I still recoil from it. It is just an exhibit for me in my argument that our media, as it often is, annihilates culture.
Hey everyone, it's Bond here from Dr. Pennsylvania. Just wanted to add my 2 cents at the end of this episode, like usual. Though me and Nick absolutely agree on the ghostwriting campaign that resulted in the story for the one local place. There's another that a lot of us do have friends and family who have had experiences there, have had stories from the place. And it's not like the 6 degrees of separation like you have with a lot of other folklore. So with the inn that we speak about, my brother, who is here with me today, has a quick little story about an experience he had there. His name is Brian. We're going to call him Brian because that was and is his name. And so why don't you tell us your little story there, Brian?
Yeah, 2010, 2011, me and 2 of my friends, Jesse and Corey, we frequented in regularly for drinks, weeknights after work. One night we had gone there and it was completely dead. It was a Tuesday, Wednesday night in the fall because it was pretty dark, but it was early. It was dead, and so we were just shooting the breeze with the bartender like normal, and we're always pretty interested in paranormal stuff, so we knew the history. We were all local to the area, so we've always heard stories. We had friends that worked there in high school that had first-hand experiences and family members as well. So we were just asking the bartender about different things and what they hear, what they haven't heard, what they've experienced. And Jesse, who's very aggressive when it comes to getting to the bottom of things, was pretty persistent about wanting to see the attic. And you've always heard about the tuberculosis ward and the orphanage and kids in the attic and getting a lot of experiences up in the attic. So she wasn't real into it. So we kept asking and we kept asking, and again, it was dead. We were the only ones there. So I think it was around like 9 o'clock. She was like, well, when you guys are leaving, if you want to see the attic, I can walk up and open up the attic, and you guys can walk up there and take a look around. And yeah, sure, why not? And no worries at this point. There was no anxiety building in me at all, and I've never been really a flight kind of person. I kind of stick my ground, and wasn't worried about anything. And Corey and Jesse were super excited about it. I'm like, all right, well, let's go up and see what it's like. So we start walking up the long staircase, and it's dark, and every step you take, it's creaking and creaking, and it's darker and darker the more you walk upstairs. And then you get to the first, the second floor, and there's nothing there. All the tables are empty. There's no lights on. There's no candles. And you walk around to the next staircase, and they open up the door, and she just opened up the door and left. I don't remember her leaving. I just know that she was not there. She left. And when you open up the door, there's no lights to turn on or anything. And three of us, Jesse and Corey, are big dudes. So like the three of us standing in this single doorway of this attic, kind of looking up into the darkness, and you can't see anything. And that's when the anxiety kind of start to hit. Like, well, who's going first? Like, so the three of us seem to walk up this single set of stairs all at the same time. Neither of them anxious at all. And again, I normally don't feel that type of anxiousness in those situations. Starts to boil over. We're about halfway up, and something inside of me said, Brian, this is not good.
Not good.
This is not a good place to be right now. And so I'm starting to kind of, not freak out, but I'm very anxious at this moment. And so Jesse takes out his like iPhone 2 or 3 at the time, had a flashlight on, turned the flashlight on and pointed at the top of the steps, and we were about halfway up the steps. And I believe it was at the top of the steps or on the side of the stairwell, there's a handprint from someone that was painting or whatever. Someone put a handprint right on the wall. And when that's all you see in the dark, and all you see is just this like dark handprint, something inside of me lost it. I said, you know what, this is not for me. I will see you guys later. And the next thing I remember is being in my truck 20 minutes away, pulling into my parents' driveway and parking, and thinking, holy shit, like what just happened? There was no paranormal experience, nothing. I didn't go to the bottom of the steps and wait for my friends. I didn't go to the bottom or out into the parking lot into my truck and wait for my friends. I turned around and like Ichabod Crane got the hell out of there. I got on my horse and I left town.
You left town, yeah.
No thoughts about, are my friends okay? What are my friends doing? Are my friends gonna make fun of me? Didn't care.
Didn't care.
Are we still hanging out? Are we doing anything else? It doesn't matter. I went home, and they either texted me or called me that night, and I was just like, yeah, I don't know. I left, and they actually waited for me outside. So there was no necessarily paranormal activity, but like the perception of the of the situation is what got me.
And that's something we talk about a lot, is that like it's like you have to listen to like your gut with like anything in life, obviously. And we actually have a previous episode, I'm not sure if you listened to it, the menacing bicycle. It's like the dumbest name for a podcast we've ever come up with, but like that's what it was. And it was him seeing this bicycle out in the middle of nowhere, and just like things not adding up for it, and it just like you having just a bad bad feeling and it like really resonating with you. And my story about meeting the guy in the woods who was dressed in a suit, like just like things where you're just like things just kind of like stack up sometimes. And like in a place like the inn, if you know the history of the place, you're going to be that much more like primed. And just because you know the history of a place and just because you may be primed doesn't mean that anything that happens is automatically negated, obviously. Like, you very well might have been picking up on just, you know, vibes that, you know, the other two weren't, you know. And even though, like, you know that handprint was from a painter probably, you know, that doesn't mean you interpreted it in a wrong way, you know. It just, you know, it's all about your own personal experience. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Like I said, I just wanted to add this on to the end of the episode. Hope you guys liked it. We'll be back with another one soon. Thank you.